Tonight we enter a land of mist and bramble where the trees are so thick they seem to whisper among themselves and the rivers cut deeper than Roman maps ever bothered to show. The locals, if they even see you coming, paint their faces blue not for show, but because war is their welcome mat. This is Gaul. It isn't yet a province or even a clean idea. It's a mess of tribes and tangled hills where the only straight line is the flight path of an arrow. You've left the ordered marble of Rome behind and stepped into a place where your sandals squish into wet forest soil and where speaking Latin earns you either a stare or a spear. You're deep in enemy territory, and let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through dew-slick grass as dawn rolls over the hills of eastern Gaul. The locals call this patchwork of forests and farmland Gallia, but it's less a country and more a thumping heart made of 100 bickering beats. There's no single king here, no single flag, just tribes like the Aedui, Arverni, Sequani, and dozens more, each with their own dialects, gods and grudges. The Romans pretend they're civilized, but most Gallic clans have laws older than Rome itself, handed down in rhythm and rhyme by druids who never write a word down, which makes invading them complicated. The first thing you notice is the stillness and unnatural quiet for land so alive. Gaul breathes, but it does not pander. You step into a clearing and spot standing stones etched with spirals, offerings of grain tucked into bark, and the faint smell of last night's fire. Then it hits you, this place isn't empty, it's watching. You grip your gladius tighter. By now, Roman merchants have been whispering about Gaul for centuries. Amber from the north flows into Roman rings. Tin salt and slaves move along hidden trails. But to most Romans, Gaul is a threat, a big beardy mystery just beyond the Alps. You've heard the stories of Gauls once sacking Rome itself in 390 BCE, laughing as the Capitoline trembled. Romans never really forgot that. They build walls, roads, and rumors in response. So when a senator named Julius Caesar gets appointed governor of a province nudging Gaul's doorstep in 58 BCE, he sees not just an opportunity, but a story. A campaign that could make him immortal. And you, unlucky legionary, are part of that story now. The rivers here are swift and moody. The Rhone cuts down from the Alps, the Seine slinks past shadowed woods, and the Loire curls like a sleeping dragon. Across these rivers, you begin to glimpse the sprawling wooden fortresses of Gallic tribes with high walls made of timber and defiance. Sometimes they welcome the Romans with feasts, hoping to pit Caesar against their neighbors. Other times, they just light the fields on fire and vanish into the trees. Guerrilla tactics before the term even existed. And yet not all is chaos. You enter a village in the lands of the Aedui who claim to be allies of Rome. They wear cloaks of thick wool, drink fermented honey in wooden cups, and debate honor with a seriousness that would make Cicero blush. You notice the chief speaks passable Latin learned from traders and diplomats. His daughter watches the Roman camp with quiet interest, though whether it's curiosity or calculation, you're not sure. At night, the drums start, deep, low rhythms that rise from the woods like heartbeats. It's just ritual, says a veteran beside you, half asleep. But his hand never leaves his hilt. Historians still argue whether the Gauls were truly as wild as Roman authors claimed, or whether much of it was convenient exaggeration. After all, if you're going to justify conquering someone, painting them as barbarians helps. Yet archaeology keeps turning up signs of sophistication forts, built with mathematical precision coins, bearing stylized art, and networks of trade that stretch farther than Rome cared to admit. There's a fringe theory you overhear one scholar muttering in the officer's tent that Gaulish society might have evolved into a federation on its own without Roman help, that it was already heading toward unification when Caesar arrived. But history didn't wait. It sent a governor with too much ambition and a well-inked pen. One early morning you stumble into a skirmish near the Jura Mountains. The air smells of pine and blood. The enemy doesn't wear uniforms, just trousers, torques and paint, but they move with fierce coordination. You fight through mist and tree roots, and when the sun finally breaks through, your cohort is fewer by a dozen. The centurion shrugs. "This is Gaul," he says, "and she eats the unready." You retreat to a Roman outpost for rest. But even there Gaul seeps in. The locals bring gifts, cheese wrapped in leaves, knives traded for salt tails of beasts in the woods. A druid appears one evening, speaking in riddles, his eyes cloudy with age, or maybe smoke. He blesses your fire with a whisper. No one sleeps easy that night, and through it all the roads are being sketched not with stone yet, but with steps, scouts and spades. Caesar's engineers are already measuring, plotting how the empire's bones will one day stretch across this land. You don't know it yet, but these forests will echo with Latin for centuries. For now, though, you just try to keep warm and hope that tomorrow the only thing that finds you is breakfast. You're standing on a ridge now, chilled by the morning wind and coated in the damp sweat of someone who's marched too long and slept too little. Behind you, mules grunt under the weight of baggage. Ahead, scouts return with news. Another tribe is stirring. Another leader is boasting another chance for Caesar to sharpen both his sword and his story. You're no longer just fighting in Gaul, you're appearing in it, immortalized by ink. For this isn't just a war of spears, it's a campaign written in real time, and the author is also the general. Julius Caesar isn't the first Roman to march into Gaul, but he's the first to carry a secretary. His Commentari de Bello Gallico, the commentaries on the Gallic War, start rolling off wax tablets and into Rome almost as soon as the first javelin flies. You don't know it, but your muddy boots, your comrades' deaths, and the names of now smouldering villages are being published like a serialized novel. Every dispatch is crafted to make him look just short of divine, to remind the Senate, and more importantly the Roman public, that Gaul is a righteous conquest and Caesar the man to finish it. And finish it he intends to do with charisma and calculation. He doesn't just march over mountains, he makes deals. One day you're standing in a chieftain's longhouse, offered smoky boar and lukewarm wine, while Caesar laughs in fluent diplomacy. The next, that same chieftain is paraded in chains behind a Roman standard. It's a talent, really. You suspect if Caesar had been born in Gaul, he'd have conquered Rome instead. You begin to notice his dual nature. On the field, he's exacting and ferocious, demanding that trenches be dug, bridges be built in days, and disobedience punished with blinding speed. But in his writings, he's generous to Roman valor, flattering to his enemies, and always modest about himself. Caesar did this, he writes, as if observing a stranger, never I. It's one of the oldest tricks in politics: sound humble while making sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Historians still debate how accurate those commentaries really are. They're the only full account we have of the war, and they're written by the man who won it. It's like letting the playwright review their own play. Some believe Caesar exaggerated the numbers, saying he defeated 250,000 warriors with just a few cohorts, or that enemy casualties reached comic book levels. Others argue the campaigns were cleaner and less chaotic than he describes. But the record we do have, his record remains one of the most compelling pieces of wartime PR ever penned. And it worked. Back in Rome, the people cheered each chapter as if following an epic saga. They read about the Helvetii migration, the defeat of Ariovistus, the Germanic king, the surrender of tribes they'd never heard of before, all delivered in crisp, dramatic Latin. It was like a Netflix release before streaming existed, except the cliffhangers cost real lives. You recall a particular moment your unit is camped along the Saône River. The mist clings to the banks as Caesar receives a delegation from the Bituriges. They plead for help against a rival tribe. Caesar nods solemnly, but you know his eyes are already scanning for opportunity. Later that night, you catch wind of his plan. Help the Bituriges now, and use their gratitude later, maybe to turn them against the Arverni. It's not just war. It's chess. And Caesar never plays without a queen to sacrifice. One evening, you stumble into a village half abandoned. The locals fled before your arrival, but they left a message: bundles of Roman armor tied to posts covered in boar's blood and feathers. It's either a warning or a performance, but either way the point lands. And somewhere, probably by candlelight, Caesar's scribes are already finding a way to make it sound noble. You build a rampart near the remains of that village, and while your fingers bleed from hauling timber, Caesar walks the perimeter with his officers discussing clauses both military and grammatical. One soldier jokes that Caesar uses the subjunctive mood more often than the optative. No one laughs, but everyone understands. Language is another battlefield, and Caesar conquers there too. Not all Romans are thrilled, of course. Back in the Senate, whispers rise that Caesar is growing too powerful, too popular, too independent. Some say he's less interested in Gaul than in what Gaul can buy him. Votes titles the kind of fame that doesn't fade when the torches go out. Others grumble that the wars are costing too much dragging on, too long spinning too wide. But as long as the scrolls keep arriving, soaked in victory, it's hard to argue. There's a quirky little story that still lingers among veterans. You hear it from an old standard-bearer one night over weak wine. During one winter lull, Caesar supposedly challenged his men to a writing contest, not for strategy but poetry. The winner was promised an extra ration of wine. The verses were apparently terrible. One soldier rhymed tribune with spittoon. Caesar chuckled and awarded the prize anyway. The message was clear: this campaign wasn't just about swords, it was about shaping a legacy line by clever line. At one point, you're stationed near modern-day Clermont-Ferrand. You help lay the foundations of a Roman fort atop an old Gallic temple site. The locals call the place Nemossos, a sacred grove. Caesar doesn't blink. Cut the trees, he orders. Build the walls. Some officers hesitate. You do it anyway. The temple vanishes beneath bricks. That night, the wind howls louder than usual. When your century is ordered east again, you pass through a valley where Caesar once parleyed with the Sequani. They'd hoped to be left alone. Instead, their neighbors were turned against them, and their leaders replaced with ones more willing to smile at Rome's terms. You feel a chill, not from the cold, but from the realization that the man you fight for wins more often with ink than with iron. And still the dispatches flow south. Caesar writes of duty of honor of reluctant conquest, but you, marching through charred fields and salt-soaked wells, begin to understand the war for Gaul isn't just about territory, it's about narrative, and his pen is conquering faster than any legion ever could. You wake to shouting, not the panicked kind, but the tense, clipped barks of men negotiating. It's the third time this month. The envoys from a nearby Gallic tribe have arrived, their hair braided and beards oiled, their cloaks damp with morning fog and intentions. Some offer grain and cattle, others demand that Roman legions leave lands that just last year had been theirs. The talks always begin in smiles, shared cups of watered wine, and flattery about Roman marble and Gallic bravery. But beneath the surface, it's a contest of wit's pride and political patience. You sit on a stone, sharpening your blade, pretending not to listen, though of course everyone does. Rome's conquest of Gaul wasn't just a clash of swords. It was also a chessboard of treaties and backstabbing, where alliances formed faster than battle formations and betrayals came wrapped in compliments. Caesar knew this, and he played it expertly. One chieftain, Dumnorix of the Aedui, smiles too wide when talking about loyalty to Rome. Everyone knows he's lying, but for now, Caesar lets it pass. The Aedui are friends of the Roman people, a title that carries just enough honor to flatter but never enough protection to stop an invasion. Dumnorix isn't alone. Across Gaul, tribal leaders are faced with impossible choices: ally with Rome and risk being seen as a traitor by your neighbors, resist and watch your fields burn. Historians still argue whether most of the tribes were duped by Caesar's charm or simply used him for their own ends, hoping to play Rome against their local rivals. The truth is, probably both. There were no pure victims or villains here, only shifting interests and layered loyalties. Gaul, like Rome, was complicated. You remember a time when your cohort was sent to escort a friendly Gallic chief to a summit. He was blindfolded for half the journey for security and treated to grapes and honey once they reached the Roman camp. He joked with Caesar, toasted his health, and then quietly had his eldest son taken hostage for safekeeping. The general insisted. It's temporary, they said, just until the roads are safe. But everyone knew the boy would be insurance for good behavior. Rome made no pretense of trust. Still, it wasn't all coercion. Some tribes genuinely saw advantage in cooperation. They gained Roman protection from old enemies, access to goods, even the chance to train their young nobles in Latin and logic. It was politics with sharp elbows and sharper smiles. You visit a village where a Roman architect is helping build a new granary, only to find that it's also doubling as a garrison outpost. Efficiency, he says with a grin. 2 birds, 1 stone, or maybe 2 cultures, 1 empire. Treachery, of course, ran both ways. One night, your camp is ambushed after a local chieftain assured you the pass was clear. Dozens of legionaries fall before the horns sound retreat. In the aftermath, Caesar doesn't rage. He calculates. He sends emissaries not with swords, but with offers. We'll forgive the misunderstanding, they say, if you supply 20 warriors for the next campaign. They agree. 2 weeks later, those warriors vanish in the night. 3 weeks after that, their village no longer exists. You learn to read the signs when an alliance is real, when it's for show, and when it's just a prelude to betrayal. A lavish feast, that's a trap. A sudden offer of tribute, desperation. A long silence. That's when you start packing the siege gear. There's one peculiar figure you'll never forget, a druid named Epasnos, who wandered into camp dressed in fox pelts and mumbling prophecies. He claimed to have seen Caesar's rise foretold in river foam and goat entrails. Caesar, amused, let him stay. For a week, Epasnos told riddles, blessed the fires, and taught a few soldiers how to carve sacred knots into their spear shafts. Then just as suddenly he vanished. Some said he went to warn the Arverni. Others whispered he was a Roman spy the whole time. No one ever figured it out. His fox-tail belt hung from a barracks door for months after. The political games turned deadlier the closer Caesar got to true resistance. The Arverni, led by Vercingetorix, began to stir. Young, fiery, and fiercely charismatic Vercingetorix had no patience for Roman gifts or titles. He understood that Caesar's diplomacy was just war in slow motion, so he did something dangerous. He unified. Not everyone came willingly, but enough did to scare Rome. He offered protection, purpose, and pride. Finally, Gaul had a figure to rally around, not a chieftain, but a general of their own. You remember the first time you saw Vercingetorix from a distance riding along a ridge in armor, unfamiliar, yet regal. His horse was black as ash, his hair tied high, and the standard beside him bore not an eagle but a screaming boar's head. The locals fell silent at his name. He didn't send messengers with polite letters. He sent scouts to burn your bridges. Soon after, everything changed. Caesar's pace quickened. Forts were reinforced, roads expanded, overnight supply lines tripled in size. Rhetoric had worked for a while, but now it was war again, and no amount of Latin flattery would split this new Gallic coalition. Not easily, anyway. You hear whispers among the officers. Divide them again, someone says. Find the weak link. But you know deep down the old tribal rivalries are fraying fast. Something new is being born in Gaul, an identity forged not by bloodlines or gods, but by a shared enemy. You're no longer just fighting tribes, you're fighting a movement. It's an odd feeling. You look around at your fellow legionaries, most of them from across the Mediterranean, and realize that for all your discipline and armor, the ground beneath you no longer feels stable, not politically, not spiritually, and certainly not diplomatically. Because Caesar's words may still be winning over some hearts back in Rome, but out here in the thickets and river valleys of Gaul, a different language is rising. One of bonfires and defiance of scars, shared between once feuding tribes of a people, slowly learning that they can say no and make it stick. Make it. The air is tight, heavy, with the kind of silence that presses against your ribs. You've seen skirmishes, ambushes, and sieges before, but nothing like this, not like Alesia. You stand atop one of Rome's earthwork walls built in manic bursts of engineering encircling not just the enemy, but also yourselves. The double wall strategy feels like madness with blueprints and sheer sorcery when completed. Inside the ring, the Gallic leader Vercingetorix holed up with his army and supplies. Outside the ring, his reinforcements swarming toward you like hornets late to the hive. And in the middle you, wondering if the dirt under your boots will soon be your grave. The siege of Alesia wasn't just a battle. It was Caesar's gamble, a bold, brilliant, and utterly brutal trap set in the hills of central Gaul in 52 BCE. The oppidum, or hill fort of Alesia, was a stronghold surrounded by cliffs, rivers, and now Roman trenches deep enough to lose a cart in. But Caesar didn't settle for surrounding the enemy. He surrounded himself too, building not one but two rings of fortification, an inner wall to keep Vercingetorix in, and an outer wall to keep his rescuers out. Every night you slept in that liminal space, caught between despair and desperation. It was one of the most insane ideas ever drawn on a Roman map. Historians still debate whether Caesar truly grasped the scale of risk, or if he simply trusted his engineers and his luck. Some scholars argue that he exaggerated the numbers of attackers and defenders to inflate the drama in his writings. Others insist the logistical feat alone earns him a spot among the top strategists of antiquity. Either way, if you were there, you weren't thinking of legacy. You were thinking about water arrows and the very long list of ways to die in a ditch. You helped dig those ditches. You remember the mud, the blisters, the way the wind carried the stink of horse dung and rotting hay. The trenches weren't just straight lines, they were puzzles of overlapping stakes, traps and towers. Caltrops buried in grass. Pits camouflaged with branches. Booby traps before the phrase even existed. It was military paranoia made manifest. And while you fortified, you watched. Inside Alesia, the Gauls rationed food. Vercingetorix sent out messengers under cover of night, urging reinforcements to come fast. Outside, those reinforcements did come by the tens of thousands. Gallic cavalry and foot soldiers appeared on the horizon, flags fluttering, drums thudding like distant thunder. The outer ring began to groan under pressure. You heard them singing before you saw them, songs of old wars of gods that didn't speak Latin, of fury layered thick with memory. Caesar walked the line. Cloak tight, brows drawn, voice calm. He promised bonuses if you held. Land, glory. For some that was enough. For others, the promise of simply staying alive outweighed any riches. You remember a joke shared in the trenches: if I die, tell my mother I was promoted posthumously. You all laughed too loud, too quickly. Then the first breach attempt came. It was a blur of horns, smoke and bodies pressing against the outer wall. You barely had time to string your bow before the towers were screaming. Arrows lit the sky. Somewhere a battering ram splintered. Caesar sent out cavalry from a hidden gate, his secret move, and drove them back, but only just. You lost friends that day. They fell into trenches you'd helped dig, swallowed by your own defenses. Inside Alesia, things were worse. Vercingetorix was running out of food. Some say he ordered non-combatants, women, children, the elderly, to leave the fort to reduce the mouths to feed. Caesar refused to let them through the Roman lines. You remember watching them gather between the two walls, desperate and exposed, caught between two wills that would not bend. It haunts you still. One of them tried to trade a carved wooden amulet for water. You couldn't take it. Night fell like a wet cloak. The second breach attempt began at dusk, more coordinated, more desperate. You manned the tower near the northern slope where the enemy broke through briefly. A Gallic warrior lunged at you with a sickle sword, and for a moment all you saw were his eyes wide, determined, not afraid. You don't remember how the fight ended, only that you were still breathing and he wasn't. The outer reinforcements tried everything. They built towers, they flanked, they sent decoys, and still the Romans held. Exhaustion settled into your bones like cold wine, but Caesar never blinked. He adjusted tactics daily, moved legions like chess pieces, sent out decoys of his own. One night he rode through the ranks sharing olives and stale bread, telling jokes in a dialect older than his republic. He made you believe that maybe, just maybe, you could outlast gods.
And then suddenly it was over.
The Gallic relief army broke, not with a roar but with a whimper. Scouts reported their retreat. You didn't believe it at first, no one did. But the songs stopped, the drumming faded, and the hills emptied. Inside, Alesia Vercingetorix understood. He held council with his chieftains. He told his men to surrender. Then, in one of the most haunting images of the war, he rode out alone. Down the hill, through your ranks, unarmed. He stopped before Caesar's platform, dismounted, and laid his weapons at the general's feet. The silence was like winter. You watched him, this man who had nearly united a continent, stand still, as a statue, while the Roman crowd gawked. Caesar didn't say much, he didn't have to. Victory was loud enough. They say Vercingetorix spent the next 6 years in a Roman prison before being executed during Caesar's triumph parade. But in Gaul, his name never quite died. There's a fringe theory that his image, tall, proud, defiant, was resurrected centuries later by French nationalists seeking a symbol of resistance. That he became more than a man, a myth, a memory you couldn't chain, no matter how many statues Rome erected. You step away from the wall. The trenches are still there if overgrown. The bones buried under the soil don't speak. But the silence they left behind, it still echoes. You're walking now, not through open fields or forested hills, but along something strangely unnatural, even divine. It stretches forward with unsettling confidence, cutting across marshes, valleys, rivers, and mountains, as if the land had simply agreed to be tamed. You're on a Roman road, and you're not alone. Mules clop past, pulling wagons of wine and grain. A courier gallops ahead, carrying orders. A merchant mutters at a stuck wheel. This isn't just a road, it's the nervous system of empire, and in Gaul it's Rome's most persuasive argument that they intend to stay. Long before the last Gallic warrior laid down his arms, Rome had already begun building. Caesar's legions were not just fighters, they were engineers, stonemasons, surveyors, and road layers. As they conquered, they paved. The Via Agrippa, which would eventually radiate from Lugdunum, modern Lyon, like a starfish began to take shape, while the Gauls were still plotting rebellion in mountain caves. Every cobblestone whispered permanence. This wasn't conquest with an end date. This was assimilation by infrastructure. You feel it under your feet, flat, hard-packed layers. Statumen, rudus, nucleus, each more compact than the last, crowned with basalt stones, polished smooth by sandals and wheels. The road doesn't meander, it aims, straight, purposeful, immune to landscape's usual stubbornness. Where hills rise, the road cuts through. Where rivers flow, bridges span. It is architectural audacity made mundane by repetition, and it's working. You remember a story passed between legionaries that Caesar once ordered a 400-foot bridge across the Rhine, not because he needed to cross it, but to show that he could. Built in just 10 days, then torn down 2 weeks later. Not war, theater. Historians still debate the point, was it a tactical necessity or a psychological flex? One thing's clear, Romans were not just fighting to win, they were building to define. But the roads didn't just serve soldiers, they carried culture. Latin phrases overheard in markets, Roman measures replacing local bartering. You meet a Gallic farmer selling salted pork near a roadside weigh station, mansio the Romans call it. He weighs it with Roman scales, speaks a clumsy mix of Latin and Gaulish, and points toward Lugdunum as if it were Mecca. His children play nearby, tracing imaginary roads in the dirt. Their grandfather still curses Rome in his sleep, but the grandchildren, they hum Roman tunes. And so the road becomes more than stone. It becomes a teacher. You pass a milestone, a miliarium planted like a totem. It tells you in clean, sharp Latin that the next town is 16 miles ahead, that Augustus once slept there, that the road was funded by Rome and blessed by Mercury, god of travel and trade. It's propaganda disguised as convenience. Every mile marker is another reminder of who's in charge. Soon you reach a fork where three roads meet. A small temple marks the crossing, its columns simple but clean. You kneel out of habit, half homage, half leg cramp, and note the offerings: pine cones, copper coins, a worn inscription thanking the emperor for safe travels. This is how Rome endures, not with grand proclamations, but with routine reverence. You wonder how many Gallic gods were swallowed this way, not by persecution, but by replacement. And yet the road is not silent. It hums with traffic, gossip, and memory. You pass a group of veterans, retired legionaries granted land in Gaul for their service. They chat about harvests and grandsons, but their shields hang by the door. Rome's reward system includes real estate, and it is as effective as any sword. By planting Roman citizens among conquered people, Rome doesn't just dominate territory, it remixes it. Still, not all roads smooth. Near the borderlands you find one washed out by spring rains. Locals grumble that it was laid too quickly, that Caesar's men skipped steps to make deadlines for his commentaries. A fringe theory among historians suggests the early road system in Gaul was more symbolic than practical, built to impress more than to last. But by Augustus's time, that changes. The empire, now less anxious about PR and more concerned with control, begins investing in durability. Roads become arteries of taxation, administration, and faith. You camp one night beside a Roman way station where a scribe scribbles receipts and tax ledgers by firelight. He tells you unprompted that he once copied a letter from a Gallic merchant to his cousin in Hispania, written entirely in Latin and complaining about Roman taxes. You ask what happened to the letter. Burned, he shrugs. Can't have record of educated resentment. One quirky bit you overhear from a weathered centurion: Rome placed sacred chickens in cages along certain key roads. Travelers would feed them before a journey. If the chickens ate heartily, it was a good omen. If not, maybe stay put. Even the most rational empire needs its lucky charms. Eventually, you reach Lugdunum. The roads here converge like strings tied to a single knot. The city pulses with everything: Roman forums, baths, temples, even an amphitheater where Gallic songs are performed in Latin translation. You see Gallic nobles in togas, children reciting Virgil, a market that smells like cinnamon and goat cheese. It's beautiful, it's terrifying. Historians debate whether Romanization in Gaul was coerced or adopted freely. Were the roads Trojan horses for empire or ladders of opportunity? You don't know. But as you walk past a Gallic girl tracing Latin letters in the dust with a stick, you wonder, is this the future or just another kind of occupation? You leave Lugdunum and follow the road south. The sky opens wide, the hills roll soft, and the wind carries a song that might be Gallic, might be Roman. You can't tell anymore. All you know is that the road is still there, straight, enduring, indifferent, carrying the empire forward one footstep at a time. The wind shifts slightly as you pass a quiet village nestled between two hills. It's unassuming, just a scattering of timber homes with smoke curling from the thatched roofs and children chasing geese through muddy alleys. But something's different here. You stop to listen, not to the laughter or the livestock, but to the words. They're speaking Latin, or at least something trying very hard to be Latin. And suddenly it hits you: this is how it happens, not through conquest or edict, but conversation. Gaul is changing its tongue, changing its... Rome never had to force Latin down anyone's throat with a gladius. It didn't need to. Latin spread like moss, quiet and persistent, clinging to roads, barracks and marketplaces. You watch a local blacksmith grumble about iron shipments in Latin. His wife argues with a tax collector in Latin. Their child chants Roman numbers while spinning in circles. The old language is still there somewhere in lullabies and curses, but it's fading syllable by syllable. You take shelter that night in a roadside tavern where the sign reads Hospitium. The innkeeper greets you in a mix of Gallic and Latin that makes your ears twitch. His accent rolls like river stones. You understand every third word, but it's enough. He tells you about a new school in the next town run by a Roman tutor. Only for the boys, he adds. The rich ones. He doesn't seem angry, just resigned. The old ways are changing and people are learning to keep up or get left behind. Historians still argue whether this Latinization was deliberate policy or just an inevitable byproduct of empire. Was there a grand strategy, or did Latin simply ride in the same carts as olive oil and amphorae? The answer, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the dust kicked up by traders and bureaucrats alike. But it wasn't just the language, it was the form of language. You stop in a small town where the locals are carving funerary stele grave markers. The inscriptions are Latin, sure, but the names still proudly Gallic. One reads, "To Segomaros, son of Litumaros, who served Rome but honored the gods of his fathers." The stone is flanked by carved boars and Roman laurels locked in visual debate. The past isn't gone, it's just wearing new clothes. One scholar you met once, an aging translator with more ink on his fingers than hair on his head, said that Latin didn't conquer Gaul. It seduced it. "It's a beautiful language," he muttered, "efficient, musical, arrogant." He paused, then added, "like Rome itself." You've thought about that often, especially when hearing merchants argue over prices using ablative absolutes. You remember a winter campaign in the Highlands. You're bivouacked in a Gallic village turned Roman outpost, and one of the younger villagers keeps hanging around your fire. At first, he's just listening. Then, he's repeating words. Then, he's asking questions about verbs. 2 weeks later, he's explaining Roman tax codes to his own uncle. You call him Little Senator. He doesn't know what that means yet, but someday he will. And then there are the scrolls. You pass through a town with a newly built tabularium, a Roman record office. It's a small building, but inside the scribes are busy. Gallic land deeds being copied in Latin. Marriage contracts, trade receipts, birth records. Language becomes law. Law becomes memory. If something isn't written in Latin, it doesn't exist to the magistrates. A fringe theory you hear from a Greek philosopher in Massilia claims that Latin spread more quickly in Gaul because it lacked a competing script. The Gauls didn't write their language down much, if at all. Druids especially refused to. So when Latin arrived, it filled not just the air, but the parchment. It offered the illusion of permanence, the seduction of being seen. Yet not everyone was thrilled. You hear stories of resistance not in battles, but in whispered mockery. One town near modern Brittany allegedly made up fake Latin words to confuse Roman administrators. Others deliberately butchered the grammar in official petitions just to see if anyone would correct them. One particularly bold bard wrote an epic in Gallic verse that mocked Caesar's prose line by line. The scroll was confiscated. No one knows what happened to him. Still, the tide was turning. Latin became the language of commerce, law, even romance. Roman love poems started appearing in Gallic graffiti, some crude, some heartbreakingly sweet. You remember reading one scratched onto a stone wall. "Lucilla, you said I was your Gaul. Now you drink wine with Marcus." Love and betrayal, two of Rome's chief exports. One spring you attend a festival where Gallic and Roman customs intertwine. A priest invokes Mars and Tutates in the same breath. Young couples dance in circles chanting in Latin with Gallic rhythm. The music feels both familiar and foreign. The hybrid culture is messy but somehow beautiful, like a mosaic made from mismatched shards. You meet a traveling poet, half Roman, half Gallic, who performs at way stations. His jokes land in both languages. He claims he once performed for a Druid council and a Roman governor on the same day. You don't believe him, but you admire the ambition. He tells you Gaul is learning to speak in layers. Every sentence he says has an ancestor. As you move farther north into lands where Rome's grip loosens, you hear less Latin. The words thin out, swallowed by forests and older tongues. But even here, a few phrases cling to market stalls and temple walls. Pax Romana, Imperator, Vectigal tax. The essentials apparently always get through. You leave one last village at dawn where the schoolteacher rings a tiny bell and the children recite their declensions. Amo, amas, amat. The words float into the sky like birds that have no idea they don't belong here. And as you walk back onto the Roman road, You realize you've just seen something both fragile and colossal, the slow, relentless conquest not of land, but of speech. And with every word lost or borrowed, a world shifts quietly underfoot. You arrive in a town that smells of mortar and ambition. Not long ago it was a sleepy Gallic stronghold, mud walls, sacred groves, clan gatherings whispered in the moonlight. Now a forum gleams at the centre, paved in imported stone. A public bath steams like some ancient god, exhaling. Merchants line up beside marble columns, hawking honeyed cakes and dyed wool. And presiding over it all, a statue of Augustus, arm-outstretched eyes made to see nothing. You realize with a chill, this place is no longer in Rome's orbit, it is Rome just dressed in Gallic weather. Temples first. They always come early the way seeds come with the wind. Roman priests, or sometimes just ambitious officials, commission shrines to Jupiter, Juno and Minerva. Some are rebuilt from older Gallic worship sites, the wooden poles swapped out for columns, the smoky fire pits replaced with tidy altars. But the locals still whisper their old prayers. You see a woman drop an offering of apples beneath a Roman statue, muttering not in Latin, but in a tongue that predates the city of 7 hills. Rome didn't erase, at least not all at once. It layered. Then the taxes come, always the taxes. A man in a crisp toga stands outside a granary flanked by 2 soldiers and a chalkboard. He's not shouting, he's reading. Numbers, quotas, grain weights. The villagers listen like it's a sermon. Once a Gallic chieftain might have demanded tribute with a raised voice and sharpened axe. Now it's a matter of scrolls and ledgers. You hear someone mutter, "At least the axe was faster." A nervous laugh follows. No one disagrees.
Rome's gift, if you can call it that, is predictability. The tax might be heavy, but it's on schedule. The census arrives with military precision, cataloguing every mouth, every mule, every inch of tilled soil. You remember a boy scribbling names into the census list, who looked up and asked if chickens counted. His officer told him, only if they vote. The boy didn't get the joke.
Historians still argue whether the Roman tax system in Gaul was exploitative or merely efficient. Some say it drained local economies to fill Roman coffers. Others argue it built roads, aqueducts and schools. Both are probably true. The empire gave with one hand and took with the other generously and with receipts. Civic life becomes the new theatre. The town builds a basilica, not a church, but a civic centre. Inside deals are brokered lawsuits, argued contracts, inked. You see a Gallic noble debating a Roman contractor about who owns a parcel of land near the river. The noble wears a Roman ring. The contractor speaks perfect Gallic. You're not sure who's winning, but both seem to enjoy the drama. Soon after, the bathhouse opens. And with it, the strangest kind of diplomacy, naked small talk. Romans love their baths, and Gauls learn quickly. You see former warriors discussing grain yields while scrubbing mud off each other's backs. A priest steams in the caldarium beside a blacksmith. Lines that once divided tribes now dissolve in warm water. You wonder how many arguments Rome avoided by installing plumbing. Yet under it all, Gallic customs simmer. A local wedding includes both Roman vows and a sacred tree dance you've never seen in Rome. A funeral ends with Latin prayers, but also with the burning of wild herbs thought to carry the soul. Rome didn't need to ban Gallic rites. It just swaddled them in marble until they looked polite. One afternoon you pass a villa being built on former tribal grounds. The owner is Gallic-born, Roman-educated and wears a toga with practiced ease. He greets you in Latin but curses his builder in Gallic. His slaves are a mix, some imported, some local. He's not an invader or a victim, he's the future. A quirky rumor spreads that a Gallic town once tried to pay their taxes entirely in cheese. When Rome refused, they built a cheese monument in protest, a tower of wheels stacked 3 stories high. It lasted 2 weeks before rats claimed it. The monument is gone, but the story lingers. Everywhere you go, you see the reshaping. Roman weights in Gallic markets, Roman dates on Gallic calendars, a boy reciting Virgil in a smoky tavern, while his grandfather tells stories of a battle he lost to Caesar's cavalry. 2 centuries, 1 table. And yet Rome doesn't conquer only with rules, it conquers with fashion. You see young Gallic women wearing Roman stole sandals and amulets of Venus. One winks at you and says she prefers Roman wine to Gallic mead. You nod, pretending not to miss the mead. There's a statue in a central square brand, new, sculpted in Roman style but depicting a Gallic hero. His features are strong, his posture stoic, his plaque in Latin. But the beard, that's all Gaul, even stone carries compromise. You spend the night in a home where the dinner starts with oysters and ends with roasted duck. Your host insists the duck recipe came from a Roman cookbook, though his wife adds a Gallic spice blend that makes your nose tingle. Over dinner, you discuss the new aqueduct. It cuts through the valley like a stone serpent delivering water with divine regularity. Your host raises a cup to the empire, he says, then after a beat, and to whoever comes next. Because even here, beneath the clean lines of the forum, some know that empires don't last forever. That baths crack, taxes change, gods fade. But cultures mutate, merge and molt. The Gallic world didn't vanish. It adapted. Quietly, cleverly, you step outside under the stars. The temple glows, the streets echo with laughter. Somewhere a flute plays a tune that sounds oddly familiar, part Roman march, part Gallic lullaby. And in that moment you realize conquest isn't always about domination. Sometimes it's about convincing people that your way is easier, cleaner, civilized, and by the time they realize what they've given up, they're too fluent to remember what they spoke before. You head west now into the highlands and shadowy groves where Roman stones give way to mossy roots and older whispers. The roads thin, the milestones grow rare, and the Latin starts to sound unsure of itself, as if it knows it's out of place. Here resistance still breathes, not as open rebellion, but as quiet refusal. Rome may have paved Gaul's valleys, but it never fully tamed its forests. You enter a village tucked into the folds of a mountain range. No statue of Augustus greets you, no bathhouse steams in the center. Instead, a circle of standing stones marks the square. A woman leads a goat around the perimeter, chanting in a language that sounds like wind and thunder. The villagers don't bother hiding their customs. They don't have to. No Roman magistrate has come through in years. And yet even here, the empire's echo lingers. A Roman pot rests by the hearth. A tunic, cut in Roman style, flaps on a line. But the people wear torques again, those thick metal collars once considered savage. You notice one boy spit after saying a Latin word. You don't ask which one. Resistance takes many forms. In some towns, it's subtle children given Gallic names no Roman census taker can spell. In others, it's ceremonial festivals that outwardly honor Mars but secretly invoke Essus or Cernunnos. And sometimes it's sharper. One garrison burned last month, its soldiers found bound with ropes of woven bramble. No one claimed it. No one needed to. You meet a Roman administrator passing through these parts, his face tight with frustration. They smile, he tells you, and nod, and then do whatever they want the moment you leave. He shows you a report filed by a junior tax collector, 3 years of unpaid tribute from a cluster of villages too foggy to be found. Rome, it seems, can conquer the land, but not always the weather. Historians still argue how deep this resistance ran. Some say the rural heart of Gaul never truly fell, that it simply waited biding time wearing Roman tunics while hiding Gallic knives. Others argue the resistance was nostalgic more than political, like grandparents refusing to use new coinage because the old ones felt heavier. But evidence remains: temples built then suddenly abandoned, settlements that flourished under Rome only to vanish within a generation, not collapse withdrawal. You pass through a region where the Druids are said to still gather. The empire had long considered them dangerous priests, judges, mystics and rebels all in one. Caesar had claimed to wipe them out, but that was decades ago, and rumors say they simply moved deeper into the forests. You hear stories of midnight rites beneath sacred oaks, of scrolls written in blood and buried beneath cairns. Probably nonsense, but no one volunteers to dig them up. One night, while camping near a lake, you're approached by a hooded man. He doesn't speak much, but offers you a carved wooden pendant shaped like a serpent devouring its tail. For dreams, he says. You wear it for warmth, but part of you wonders whether it will do something. This is Gaul, after all. Not all its gods are gone. You travel with a Roman detachment sent to investigate reports of unrest in the northwest. What you find is not rebellion, but a village that's reverted. Roman tiles ripped from rooftops, Latin plaques painted over, the forum repurposed as a livestock pen. It's not rage, it's rejection. The centurion files a report. Cultural decline, he calls it. Spiritual rot. But to you it feels more like remembering. And it's not just the villages. In cities too, cracks appear. Graffiti in forgotten dialects. Shrines to forgotten gods tucked behind aqueduct pillars. Even in Lugdunum, the heart of Roman Gaul, you spot a man tapping out a rhythmic chant on a market stall, a cadence you last heard, sung in the mountains. It's catchy, it lingers. A fringe theory you once heard from a young philosopher, half Gallic, half Roman, is that Gaul never fell. It fused, that its soul was never conquered, just wrapped in new skin. Rome, she said, is a mask Gaul wears for trade. You asked if she believed that. She smiled. Don't you? In one forest village you meet a former Roman soldier, born in Campania, fought at Alesia, now lives here with a Gallic wife, her family, their goats. He teaches Latin to the kids, but also Gallic songs. Why not both? He shrugs. Empires change, families stay. You attend a wedding, where the ceremony is half in Latin, half in something older. They drink from wooden bowls, leap over fire, then exchange Roman rings. You don't understand all of it, but you feel its weight. It's not resistance like rebellion. It's resistance like roots. You begin to see that in these far places beyond the reach of censors, and census, the Gallic spirit never asked for Rome's permission to survive. It simply did. In song, in silence, in soil. A patch of land where Roman roads don't reach. A spring still named in the old tongue. A lullaby that remembers a time before togas. One evening, you stop at a crumbling Roman outpost. Vines creep along the walls. The gatehouse sags. Inside, someone has carved a boar into the stone floor, its tusks curled, its eyes unyielding. Below it, a phrase in Latin, nos manimus. We remain. You sleep beneath it, dreaming of forests and flame of whispers in a language you don't speak but somehow understand. You're standing in a bustling square, and for a moment you forget this is Gaul at all. The buildings rise in proper Roman fashion, brick and stone arch and column neatly spaced, precisely engineered. Officials move briskly in their dyed robes, barking orders in fluent Latin. Nearby children rehearse a declamation quoting Cicero with accents barely touched by the old tongue. The maps on the magistrates' walls say Gallia, not Gaul. The paperwork says Provincia. Somewhere along the line, the land changed names, and with it, its reflection in the mirror.
It didn't happen in a single generation, but it happened.
You pass a bronze plaque on the courthouse wall. It lists the names of local senators, 5 of them Gallic by birth, Roman by status. One even shares your old commander's name, a tribute or maybe a bit of flattery to whoever sponsored his citizenship. Rome was many things, but petty it was not. If you played the game well, it would make you Roman. And the Gallic elite, oh, they played well. The tribal chieftains of old didn't disappear. Many of them rebranded. They became Dumviri town magistrates, military advisors. Their sons studied in Massilia or even Rome itself. Their daughters married into minor Roman families and brought with them dowries measured in cattle, not coin. Gaul, once a quilt of fierce independence, had learned the advantage of a single story told in marble. You overhear a heated argument in the street, not fists, but philosophy. A debate over Roman legal precedent being applied to a dispute about Gallic grazing land. Both men quote law codes. One waves a stylus like it's a dagger. You smile. There was a time they'd have settled this with spears, now with citations. Historians still debate whether this transformation was true assimilation or mere surface polish. Did the Gauls really become Roman, or did they just become fluent in the performance? Archaeologists point to the hybrid artifacts, boar-headed gods carved in Roman stone coins bearing Gallic iconography but minted with Latin slogans as proof that identity was never erased, only refitted. Rome didn't purge, it absorbed. It strikes you as strange how swiftly loyalty can shift when roads are stable, food is reliable, and status is offered like a warm cloak. The Gallic tribes that once fought Caesar tooth and nail now send their best men to guard the same empire he built. You hear of a Gallic cavalry unit that fought in Judea, another stationed in Britannia. They return with tales of deserts and strange gods, but always in Latin. In a town near the Loire, you visit a school where boys memorize Roman history. One boy asks about the Gauls who resisted Caesar. The teacher pauses, then carefully replies, "They were brave, but misguided." The boy nods. No one mentions Vercingetorix. Still, his name hasn't vanished. You hear it whispered in taverns, scratched on the bottom of amphorae. One old man tells you he saw a statue of him once hidden in the cellar of a Gallic noble's villa. Still has his sword, he chuckles. Still waiting. A quirky tale circulates about a Gallic merchant who renamed his dog Cicero just to insult it whenever it misbehaved. The joke spread quickly. You spot at least 3 dogs answering to that name in one town alone. Even the satire now speaks Latin. You spend time in a provincial capital where the governor is of Gallic ancestry. His banquet is a fusion of flavors: Roman olives, Gallic boar, Eastern spices. His dining room is adorned with tapestries showing Roman gods but using Gallic knot patterns. He gives a toast halfway through the meal in Latin, then finishes in a sing-song chant that sounds like it belongs around a fire in the woods. At the edge of town, you find a temple that's half crumbled. A local woman is tending its garden. You ask who the temple honored. Used to be Minerva, she says. Before that, someone older. She doesn't elaborate. You don't press. Even the land bears traces of this transition. Fields once shaped irregularly by clan boundaries are now laid out in neat Roman grids. Vines for wine, orchards for export. The empire doesn't just settle people, it settles patterns. But the soil remembers the footsteps of barefoot hunters and druids in robes. It always does. And the names, oh the names. You meet a man named Lucius Segomarus, a Roman prenomen paired with a Gallic legacy. His sons are Gaius and Marcus. His father was just Segomarus. And his grandfather, you ask, he doesn't know, the name was never written down. One evening, while watching the sun dip behind a Roman archway built into an old Gallic hill fort, you realize something. The conquest isn't just roads and taxes, baths and language. It's memory. What gets written, what gets forgotten, what gets folded into marble until no one remembers it was ever wood. You hear church bells in the distance. A new sound, a new god. The transformation isn't finished. Maybe it never will be. As you leave town, a young girl waves at you. Her tunic bears a stitched boar, her bracelet the Roman eagle. She shouts goodbye in Latin. Then something else in Gallic, perhaps. You don't recognize it. But the tone is warm, and that's when it finally hits you. Gaul didn't vanish. It became Gallia, same land, new voice, same people, new words, and beneath it all the hum of something older that never quite let go. You're walking alone now, near dusk, the light folding low across the hills like a cloak being drawn shut. There are no banners fluttering, no garrisons in sight, no proud march of legions or shouts in the forum. Just the sound of your boots against packed earth and the steady rustling of trees. You pass under an arch, once crowned with a Roman inscription, now half erased by wind and lichen. A few letters still cling stubbornly to the stone. AVGVST, something grand once. Now it's just a whisper. You reach the remains of a village built on layers of forgetting. There's a shrine, cracked and covered in moss, but still standing. an aqueduct, now dry, an amphitheatre where weeds rehearse soliloquies in the silence. But there are signs of life too, gardens freshly dug, a cooking fire flickering in the distance, chickens pecking between fallen tiles. Rome may have faded, but the people remained, and in their living they keep the stones alive. You walk to the edge of what was once a Roman road, no longer straight, its stones buckled by roots and frost. You can still trace its outline like the memory of a dream you almost remember. The locals call it something else now. You ask a man stacking firewood nearby what it was. The long path, he shrugs in a dialect shaped by Latin, but twisted by centuries of village speech, goes nowhere fast. You sit on the remains of a milestone. The engraving has worn soft, but you can feel the grooves if you run your fingers across them. You wonder what traveller stopped here last 200, 500, 1,000 years ago. Did they rest like you are? Were they headed to trade, to war, to home? Did they speak Latin? Did they think they were Roman? Historians still debate when exactly Roman Gaul ceased to be Roman. Some say the date is 476 CE, when the Western Empire fell. Others point to earlier ruptures, barbarian invasions, shifting economies, local rebellions. But out here you realize the change wasn't sudden. It was slow, gentle, uneven, like rain softening stone one drop at a time. You see evidence of that softening everywhere. A Gallic farmhouse with a Roman roof, a Roman watchtower where children now fly kites, a Gallic harvest festival celebrated with Latin prayers. Even the graves speak both languages. One reads, "To Flavius Celtillus, faithful husband, fierce hunter, son of Gaul and Rome, a man of two worlds." You smile, aren't we all? One quirky tale you hear in a nearby village, probably apocryphal, is that every spring the locals gather to listen for voices beneath the ruins. Some say it's just wind in the stones, others believe it's the old gods arguing with the new. Either way, they leave out wine and bread, just in case, says the baker, eyes twinkling. You help mend a wall before you leave. The family thanks you in a string of phrases you half understand. The words are Gallic in origin, but they bend like Latin reeds. You reply as best you can. You're not sure if it's the right grammar, but the meaning lands. They nod, you nod, it's enough. Later you walk past a field where a young boy is carving something into the dirt with a stick. You lean in. It's a letter. An R maybe. All part of an old Gallic rune. He looks up, grins, then erases it with his foot. Just playing, probably. But you still wonder. The sun slips behind the horizon, and the ruins begin to dissolve into shadow. The world feels quieter now. You lie back on the warm grass, your head resting against an old Roman foundation stone. Above you, the stars prick through the darkening blue, the same constellations the Druids watched, the same ones Roman generals read, as omens, the same ones we still point at today, with unanswerable questions. Gaul is gone, Gallia remains, and under every footstep, every syllable, every prayer, in every language there's something older, deeper, not lost, just waiting. The wind down begins slowly as twilight deepens, and the last birds call their evening songs from the hedgerows. The air cools and the sky turns a soft shade of iron blue, the kind that only appears when the day is truly done. You shift slightly, sinking deeper into the grass, into the folds of history, into the quiet between empires. You imagine the sound of sandals once scuffing over this same soil, the murmur of a trader's cart, the echo of a priest's chant in a temple that no longer stands. The rhythm of time is long here, unhurried, unbothered by borders and banners. Close your eyes. Let your breath slow with the fading wind. Feel how the past isn't behind you but beneath you, supporting you gently like the old road under layers of moss. The stone is still there. It always is, even when it seems gone. The languages may change, the statues may crumble, but the footsteps remain. Yours among them. Sleep now. Let the story pause where it always does, in the silence just before morning, when history rests and the world hums low and soft, waiting for you to rise again.